Imagine my shock when I was told this story about a young skinny lady who was rejected by all the men in the community because of her skinny stature, and finally finds the love of her life only for her own sister to find a way to snatch him away from her. Lock up your doors and let's dive into this amazing story. In the bustling city of Lagos, there lived a poor widow named Amaka and her two daughters. Her first daughter, Janet, was a very skinny lady. She had a very skinny stature that displayed all the bones in her body, and this made no man to be interested in her, and all the men in the community avoided her. Unlike her elder sister, Ogechi had a very nice shape that attracted all the men that ever came across her. This made all the men in the whole community to admire her. Anytime she was walking on the road, even married men will forget that they are beside their wives and begin to admire her. Whatever Ogechi wanted, there were always a lot of men stand by that will provide it for her in a second. And this made their mother, Amaka, to be always fond of her. Amaka began to treat Ogechi specially than Janet, due to the quality wrappers that men floated on her, begging her to make her daughter to marry them. And one of these men was a man called George, a middle-class man who had just finished his youth service and was now working with an oil firm. He had always been admiring Ogechi from their school days, but Ogechi had never given him a chance. She kept on telling her mom that she was too young to be tied down by marriage. She said that she wanted to keep using her shape to get whatever she wanted. Amaka always kept on raining praises on Ogechi, making her to always feel that no man could ever resist her beauty. Janet would just sit down at a corner, crying deeply, as no man had ever walked up to her because of her stature. She had tried all she could to know if she could get any man's attention, all to no avail. She had tried eating excess food, applying a lot of makeup, yet she still looked like a laughingstock to them. Her mother wasn't helping matters at all. She kept on reminding Janet of her condition at any slightest opportunity. One day, Ogechi and her mother Amaka were having a discussion about the type of man that Ogechi should plan on marrying. Janet just listened to them from afar, and then she decided to engage in the discussion. Her mother just looked at her and laughed, saying, "Useless girl, go and marry you. Just take a look at yourself in the mirror. You can't even be attractive to a madman, yet you open that silly mouth of yours to advise your sister on the type of man she should get married to. You go and find your own man now." Ogechi just kept on laughing, and Janet felt ashamed as she ran into her room crying. She couldn't believe that her own mother would say such a thing to her. She kept on crying and weeping as she laid on her bed that cold rainy night. At times, Janet would just sit down and watch her sister with her friends discussing and flaunting the gifts that men had bought for them. She would just sit down at a corner in tears, knowing fully well that she had nothing to show. Her friends would just look at her and laugh, pointing fingers and making jests of her, asking her on the day that she would be able to show a gift that a man had ever bought for her. They would just roll up in laughter, leaving her in her own world of tears. One day, Ogechi begged Janet to escort her to visit one of her boyfriends in their house. Janet refused, knowing fully well that she would feel intimidated, but after much pleading from Ogechi, she decided to go with her. While they were still walking on the road, a very big jeep pulled beside them, and to the greatest surprise, the prince of the community wind down the glass and waved towards them. Ogechi, knowing fully well that the prince would be calling nobody else but her, rushed over to meet him, but to her greatest surprise, Prince Kenneth told her that he wasn't referring to her, but her sister Janet. Ogechi was stunned. She couldn't believe her ears. Why the hell would the prince of the whole kingdom be calling her skinny sister, a lady that even poor men had rejected? She quietly went aside and told her sister that the prince wanted to speak with her. Janet was surprised and went to meet the prince, and he engaged her in a little discussion. Ogechi watched from behind as her sister Janet was smiling with the prince, discussing happily. She was filled with anger and jealousy that she angrily stormed home. When she got home, her mother was surprised and asked her what the problem was, and she began to explain to her mother how embarrassed she felt when the prince chose to talk to her skinny sister over her. She felt that she was the only one who was expected to catch the prince's attention because of her attractive shape, not that her skinny sister that even ordinary men had rejected. Just as they were still talking, to make matters worse, the prince drove into the compound to drop off Janet since Ogechi had earlier left them. Janet kept on smiling and waving at the prince till he left the compound. Just then, her angry mother Amaka rushed towards her with anger, asking her what she was discussing with the prince, but Janet didn't answer them. She just walked into the house. Amaka was confused. She tried to comprehend what the prince saw in her skinny daughter that will make him choose her over Ogechi, her favorite daughter with an attractive shape. From that day, the prince kept on visiting Janet, always making her laugh. They would always hang out together, having fun, and the prince kept on buying expensive gifts for her, making sure that she was never lonely again. Ogechi was so jealous that she ran to meet her friends for ideas on how she would get the prince's attention. They began to advise her to wear short attractive dresses and makeups whenever the prince was around, but despite all her efforts, the prince never seemed to notice her. On one particular day, the prince visited their house, but only Ogechi was around. The prince then decided to go, but she told him that he should just wait a little and that Janet was on her way home, so he just decided to stay back and wait for her. Ogechi saw this as a chance and began to make some advances at him. This got Prince Kenneth irritated and he scolded her, warning her never to come near him again as he left the house. When he got home, he told his mother about his desire to marry Janet. The queen became mad with anger, asking him if he was in his right senses. She then asked him how the prince of the kingdom would abandon all the beautiful ladies in the community and was after a skinny pale lady. She kept her stand, saying that she wasn't in support of the marriage, but Prince Kenneth kept his own stand, saying that he wouldn't marry any other lady if he wasn't allowed to marry Janet. He told her that he would rather remain single. When Janet told Ogechi about the prince's proposal to her, Ogechi pretended to be happy for Janet, but deeply in her mind, she told herself that she couldn't let that happen. She began to think of several things to do to stop the marriage, and then an idea came to her. The next day, Ogechi told her sister that the prince wanted to see her in the afternoon in the palace. Janet was confused but accepted to be there. Just as Janet left for work, Ogechi took some fruits to the palace for the prince and told him that those fruits were from her sister. The prince suspected that something was wrong somewhere, but he decided to accept the fruit since she said that it was from her sister Janet. Just as the prince ate the fruit, he began to feel very dizzy and he couldn't control himself any longer. He fell unconscious. Ogechi smiled hard as she began to make some advances at him, and just then, Janet walked into the room, looking very shocked at what she saw. She immediately felt heartbroken and ran out of the room in tears. The prince immediately regained consciousness. He tried to stop and explain what happened to Janet, that it was all a setup, but Janet didn't want to listen to him. She just told him never to come near her again. She couldn't believe that the man she trusted so much would do such a thing to her. She just sat one corner in her room, crying bitterly. Ogechi was so happy to announce the good news to her mother Amaka that she has successfully broken the relationship between the prince and her sister. She then told her mother that she would begin to work on her next plan of getting the prince's attention. That night, the prince could not sleep. Janet was no longer picking his calls. How would he explain to her that it was all a setup. He kept on drinking away his sorrows, and the queen walked up to him and began to ask him why he was so desperate on marrying Janet after all. The queen kept on suggesting that he should take Ogechi as a wife instead, but he just looked at his mother and said, "Mom, I'm not after her shape or stature. What I admire is the inner beauty in her, and Ogechi does not possess that quality." The whole palace was touched by that statement. They began to think of a way to get Janet back, but she wasn't ready to listen to any of them. She just wanted to be all alone. One early Monday morning, Janet went to the bar where she worked as a sales girl, but when she got to the place, she was so shocked that the entire environment looked empty. No cars was parked outside the bar and everywhere looked quiet. But she got into the bar and was so shocked at what she saw. Everywhere was decorated, and at the center of the bar was a cake with an inscription, "Happy Birthday." She had even forgotten that that day was her birthday because she couldn't remember the last time that anyone ever celebrated with her. She was filled with joy as she raised up her eyes and saw the prince at a corner in the bar, sipping a drink. Slowly, people began to come out from their hiding places with different gifts. Janet could not stop laughing in joy. The prince quietly moved towards her and began to ask for forgiveness. She just hugged him tightly, and tears of joy began to flow down her cheeks. That was the first time she had ever felt what is love. The news began to spread across the villages, and some ladies went to Ogechi to give her and her mother the news. They couldn't believe it, that they had to run down to the bar themselves, and they were so shocked on what they saw. Ogechi began to beg her sister for forgiveness. She told her that she was the one that set up the prince. Janet just looked at her and then said, "Never you predict or conclude a person's future because of their present condition, because nothing is permanent." She forgave Ogechi, but no man ever wanted to marry Ogechi after then, because they now saw her as a harlot who goes about flirting with men. The same Janet that all the men rejected and no one ever believed that she would get married ended up marrying the prince of the whole community. The end. I know you love this story. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories, and don't forget to share to your friends. If you were Janet, what would you do after discovering what Ogechi had done to you? Drop your answer in the comment section below. See you in our next story. Goodbye for now.